Humans of the Cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we are doing a super early ban list discussion. We're in a weird place. We know where we've been. We've had tier as the best deck in the game for quite a bit of time. And in fact, prior to the ban list, pretty much exactly a month ago, we were already in like tier limit tier 0 format post Shizu tier. So we're already like a full format of tier 0 tier limit essentially, but we still have another 1 or 2 months to go before Konami will actually give us a ban list, most likely, but that doesn't mean we can't have a discussion here. I haven't really done a legit full-on ban list discussion for this upcoming format, so, you know, here's to 2023. Hopefully we get a good one when we do, because one thing we've seen is that in the past, Konami has loved starting off the year with a big ban list. A lot of hits. Let's kind of like hey, it's a new year, let's get a new format, let's kind of reset a lot of things, let's hit a lot of the best decks, and let's move on and make the new year kind of feel like its own year, you know what I mean? So hopefully that's the route they go. Before we get into it, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more discussions like this down the line. But yeah, let's jump in. So looking at my list here, I think it's actually going to make more sense if we go by actually like categories instead of going, these should be banned, these should be limited, these should be semi-limited. Let's just start by categories, right? In terms of like avenues of the game that I think should be hit in different ways. Let's start off with the best deck. We know what it is, the elephant in the room. It's tier. Everything here comes back to tier. If anything needs to be touched here, even if nothing else gets hit, there needs to be a significant hit to tier limit. We all recognize that. And I think there's really only two ways to go about it. The first way would be to go after the main deck in numbers, right? We saw this in the OCG. I think they limited Havness, they limited the field spell, and I think they have 1 or 2 other names also hit down as well. Just limiting their ability to get access to those, the less tier limit names, the less consistently they're able to mill them, so you're kind of hurting their consistency there, actually making it more of an RNG based deck than like the really high consistency it already has. As well as hurting their ability to get the right names when they want them by hitting the field spell. They're not going to be able to get access to everything like that. I think that's definitely an avenue, but if I had to pick one, and this would just be way simpler, just ban Kit Kalos, to be honest. This card kind of gives me like Zodiac Broad Bull vibes, just in the sense that like every single tier limit line goes through Kit Kalos. Every single Zodiac line, when it was at its heyday, went through Broad Bull. They just got you such free advantage that every single play went through them super easily, super consistently, and the advantage was crazy. Kit Kalos is a +1 on summon, and then once you get it sent to grave, it could be anywhere up to another +1 to like a +4 by just giving you like insane amounts of value depending on what your mills are, and with how many good millable cards you play in the deck, you're always like guaranteed to hit at least 1 good mill. And that's where the card is just crazy to me. I don't think it kills the engine. I still think it's one of the best fusion-based engines in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Even without Kit Kalos, because they can fuse generically into a lot of different like generic monsters and other archetypes monsters and stuff. But you would lose that like central pillar card that you go through every single line. Like every single line goes into Kit Kalos and then branches out from there. And when you hit Kit Kalos, you just get so much crazy advantage that it's kind of what breaks the deck the most for me. So I think that's the simplest hit. Just ban Kit Kalos. I know a lot of tier players would be upset if they just banned Kit Kalos, but I still think there would be ways to abuse the deck, or just not nearly as consistently and as powerfully as it has been over the last little bit. So that's what I'd like to see for tier. I wouldn't hate it if they hit the main deck in numbers, but if I had to pick one route, I'd rather just see Kit Kalos go. Simple, easy. We've seen this time and time again. You have to hit central pillars of these archetypes in the extra deck usually, because that's the most broken part about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is extra deck accessibility. We'll go from there. Woo! Talking about tier is exhausting. So we run into an interesting dilemma when we hit tier limit, right? And this happens in a lot of formats, especially formats dominated by one central deck. Once you hit that deck, the format kind of then defaults to the next level decks, right? Which would end up being, to me, 3 main things. Sprite, Flunderies, and Despia, I guess. Despia branded, whatever you want to call that deck. Those to me are like the most consistent, next best performing decks in the game. And I'd also like to see small hits to those decks just to bring their power level, not kill them, but just a little bit down. That way it doesn't just end up being a format dominated by those decks that have already been good and playable for multiple formats, right? So I'd like to see small hits for those. Starting off with Sprite. To be honest with Sprite, I kind of just want to see starter get limited. And maybe that's it. There's an argument that we should follow in the OCG's footsteps and also limit something like Jet. But I think if starter is limited, then like having multiple Jets, what is it really doing for you? Because after the one starter, once you fire it, the deck doesn't recur cards from graveyard in the form of their spells and traps. So the only search targets for Jets after that point is Smashers and is it Double Cross? I think is the trap card that's decent. That's it. And you have no more engine access, just interruptive cards. And I think that's totally fine. So I don't think hitting Jet really does that much. To me, it's starter because when you play against Sprite, one of the most debilitating things is if they do all their Sprite stuff, they're starting off and you're trying to throw interruptions at them, and maybe you try to interrupt them in a way where you're like, okay, I'm going to clear all their 2s off the field, and that way they can't extend because all the Sprite cards need level 2s on the field. Except one, and it's starter. And at 3, it feels like that's always live. That always could be the last card in their hand. And that helps them break through and play through all your interruption, and it's just way stronger. It's just like it's the only 1-card starter they have. Forces them to have a lot of 2-card combos, 3-card combos to play through interruption, or have a legit good hand, strong board and everything. And so I think starter to 1 feels pretty safe. Yes, it could make it a little bit sacky, but it also takes away from the grind game. Once starter is gone, the only thing Jet is searching at that point is interruptive cards, not cards that actually push the engine and help them reestablish a really strong board. So that would be my pick. I'd like to see starter go to 1, just a little small nick to Sprite to make them a little bit easier to deal with. Flunder. We know what this is. We know where we're at with Flunder. Ban barrier statue, please. The wind barrier statue, it's got to go. It is so easily accessible via the engine. It's got to go. I know a lot of people are going to tell me, you know, John, the Harpy's Feather Storm 2, that card needs to go. I get it. That card is degenerate as hell, but 1, it's not searchable in anything except for Harpies. 2, it's only good going first. Going second, it is not that good, except for in Harpies, right, where you can put a Harpy Lady name on the field. Going second, then it's decent, but this deck isn't doing that. If you draw this going second, you have to hold it in the hand for your opponent's turn, hold it in the hand in your turn, set it, and then it's activatable on turn 3. That's not that good into an established board. So Flunder, ban barrier statue, the wind one, please. And then Branded. Branded's a weird one because, you know, what do you do with them? Do you hit a central card in the extra deck and just ban it? Do you limit or semi-limit a card like Branded Fusion? Or do you go after their main deck consistency cards? Put Branded Opening to 1, put Aluber to 1, right? Stuff like that. If I had to pick, I would just say I'd like down the line Branded Fusion to go to 1. The deck has a ton of recursion and ways to like reset Branded Fusion back from grave, so that's not the biggest deal to me. The bigger deal to me is almost like the same argument with Sprites, where the most busted hands Sprites have is when they have everything, they're kind of playing, and they get interrupted, and then they just go last card in hand, starter. And you're like, oh, yeah. That's kind of how Despia feels. You negate the Aluber. You negate, you know, the next card they make, right? You're trying to keep them off of everything, and then they show the last card in hand, Branded Fusion. And you're just like, yeah, it's brutal. So at 1, they're not hard opening as much, punishing you for the way you're playing that in that realm, but also, also it does hurt their grind game a little bit. They're not able to search it from deck anymore once it's gone. They have to only get it back from grave, which forces them to play certain ways. I think Branded Fusion to 1 would be good. The only reason I'm not sure they'll go this route or they'll hit Despia even at all is we have 2 more fusions in Photon Hypernova that have to do with the Albaz lore, and then there's another new fusion monster in the next core set, Cyberstorm Access, that just got revealed. So because of that, I'm not sure they'll actually touch Despia at all, but if I could pick, I'd like to see Branded Fusion go to at least 2, if not 1. because hard opening that card is brutal, especially when they force out multiple interruptions with everything else and then end with Branded Fusion. The card just gets so much advantage, it's crazy. So that's what I like to see. So now that we're done with the archetypal stuff, I think we move to more generic options when we're considering stuff to hit. I think the first thing is to focus on a couple of packages that are somewhat new to the game and have just kind of been taking over in terms of their dominance. First off would be Bestials. I'd love to see Magnamute go to 1. It's, in my opinion, by far the best Bestial. It's a DD Crow. They're all DD Crows on legs, 2,500 body, and it searches any dragon in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That's a little bit too much for me. I think it 1 is fine because you're not going to be seeing it as consistently. You're going to be playing the other Bestials that, like, kind of once you fire them, most of their purpose is there. It's not also connecting you to more engine pieces that you can keep playing that way. I think that's a little bit more fair. I like the idea of having 1 for like synergies with other dragon decks specifically where they can access it a little more easily, but just 1 I think is fine. From there we move to Kashtira. This is another interesting one. Kashtira is weird because we're gonna get a big wave in Photon Hypernova, although it's kind of like Flunder-ish. It wants to play Floodgates, it wants to play Shifter. It's not a very fun, interactive deck that a lot of people are going to be excited to play against. And plus, generically, it's being abused. So could they meet in the middle and say, Fenrir to 2? That way, for the grind game as a splashable card, because normally with Fenrir, the really powerful part about it, the part that puts it over the top for me, is the fact that it searches another copy of itself. It guarantees you follow-up. Whereas with only 2 copies, you go summon the first one, search the second one, and that's it. You have 1 more, but that doesn't mean you can grind for multiple sets of turns, just going every turn. Fenrir, boom, and just plus like crazy. So I think 2 kind of limits that. It's a very small hit to Kashtira, but it's something that I think we'll see down the line. You know, in a perfect world, we'd get it on this ban list, but I'm not exactly sure if it'll be on this one just because of the stuff in Photon Hypernova. And the last package to talk about is definitely the Ishizu Fairies. I think the big thing to note is when you really look at the Ishizu Fairies, they don't have a ton of synergy with like that much stuff. There's like the Vernalizers and Naturia, and obviously Tearlament is like the big one. Madolche is another one. But there's not too much after that. It looks on the outside like this super generic, abusable archetype, but in terms of like actual good synergy, there's not a ton of decks. So do I want to see it hit? Yes, because I think a fundamental thing that's kind of been hurting Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot right now is between the Bestials, between Dweller, between, you know, Shifter, I guess, and like the Macrocosmoses of the world, as well as the Ishizu Shufflers, graveyard decks that are not as powerful and resilient as Tearlament, like, cannot exist in the metagame right now. And there's a lot of decks that people love that have graveyard uses and kind of need the graveyard to really compete at all and really just play their deck, really. And they kind of get shut down by these things. So I'd like to see Keldo go to 1, Keldo searching all of the other Ishizu names. I think that's cool. You know, also for Tearlament, if that deck is still live in any capacity, you're also lowering the number of shufflers that will be millable to just get them live for their shuffle effects. I think that works out. I think they're not as big of a deal once we see Tearlament get hit heavily. But I think this would still be a nice welcome hit regardless. Too many shufflers is just overwhelming. It's too much for a lot of decks to handle. So I think that would be good. There's an argument to also put Mudora to 1, just shufflers, just cut down on the shufflers entirely, but I think just Keldo to 1 for now would be fine, especially in conjunction with the Tearlament hits. And then from there we move to 2 Floodgate cards. There's always Floodgate cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That, depending on the time, the current situation, they gotta go. So first I would say Dweller, kind of in conjunction with like the Bestial stuff and the Ishizu Fairy stuff. There's so much graveyard hate. Like decks, like rogue decks that use the graveyard, they're just not as good as tier, so they can't play through these things. And they just get decimated. So I'd like to see some of those decks become just a little more playable. And you know, there's other good rank 4s out there, and I think Dweller will go eventually. Hopefully it's this time, but yeah, it's gonna go at some point. I think why not now? And the last one is Artifact Scythe. Not a card that's played too much right now, but it's always one of those cards where we go in and out and in and out of formats where it comes back in as one of the best, you know, just game-winning options for one of the best decks in the game. And it's just a degenerate one. I'd always rather see boards that have multiple interactions, multiple negates, rather than one card that if it resolves, it just turns off probably your whole deck, at least if you're playing one of the 95% of decks that you know, needs the graveyard to play at all. So yeah, I hate that. But yeah, I think that's mostly it. I'm sure there's some other stuff that you guys will let me know in the comments if I missed anything on in that section, the generic stuff. I think that's most of what I'm looking for here as far as what I want to see hit on the next ban list. Hopefully it's a big one. Hopefully it addresses all these things in one way or another. But we'll just have to wait and see as always. Also, keep in mind, things could also change. We're going to get Photon Hypernova. The format could change. We're going to get some other products, some other sets before the next ban list. We could be in a different situation where we're not looking at the same things to be hit anymore. We're going to have to wait and see on that as well. So yeah, that's everything I have for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching as always. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more discussions like this one down the line. And Happy New Year's 2023, hopefully. Things keep going well for us, and I'm going to keep making videos. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.